Hey everyone and welcome back. On this week's video, I'll be breaking down why your elbow issues may in fact be ribcage issues. Obviously, if you have structural considerations, this video will not apply, but for everyone else, keep watching. Okay, so for a lot of us, when we are interacting with the world around us, we are generally thinking about the piece of our body that is doing the interacting. For most of the things, that will be our hands. So this is the case for my microphone. And if I want to manipulate this, I can just do any kind of things with my fingers and my wrist. And now my forearm is getting a little bit involved when I'm flipping it over, right? So right now, this is really all that I'm doing. And for most of us, that's really where it ends. We don't think about anything further up the chain. If you practice martial arts or if you've done a rotational sport, you'll understand where I'm going with this. So here, if I just do this all the time when I'm manipulating an object, you can see that that's just firing up my forearm muscles, right? So now this joint is going to go through a little bit of wear and tear just because this is the only way that I'm choosing to interact with this thing. Now, if I choose to bring in my upper arm when I'm flipping over, now I have more leeway and more give. This joint isn't going to be responsible for bearing all the load. And I can take that even further when I add rotation into the mix. So this is maybe not the best example for just flipping an object over, but when I am swinging, right? If I'm crashing down with my tennis racket, or if I'm giving you a backhand, because I think I'm in a Bruce Lee movie, right? So, but these things require more of your torso interaction, torso involvement, torso engagement. What I'm really saying is it involves rotation. And even then, when we rotate, when we think we're rotating, when we think we're using our waist, we're not really. A lot of us have no idea of how to interact or marry the rib cage with our appendages, in this case, the arms. So whenever any of us feel discomfort that is non-structural in nature, a lot of the time that is because we are lacking in ability to acquire other somatosensory feedback, feelings. Okay, so for me, whenever I'm doing a particular martial arts move, it's Shi Chu Dong, so it's snake comes out of hole, it's this kind of thing, I will feel a lateral elbow thingy pop up every now and then. Right, usually it's because I'm coming down with something, I'm getting sick, or I'm not sleeping enough, or for me it's going to be an emotional response to something that's happened. It's very rarely at this point going to be a movement cause or a movement causation. So whenever I do feel this elbow thing pop up, like right here, for me it's about getting the feeling back in my obliques. So I set myself up against a wall or on the floor, I exhale, and then I try to feel my clavicle and my shoulder blade going forward while I keep pressure on the surface, whether that's a chair or a wall or the floor, whenever I exhale. If you guys want examples for that, you can check out that video, which is the 90-90 hip lift. Any video actually that I've put up in the first 30 weeks of this year. The Thor press is another good one because it actually forces you to stay on that loaded side. But yes, whenever you feel some kind of discomfort and it's non-structural in nature, or you just woke up with it one day, or it happened out of nowhere, things like that, where there's no damage to be seen, you have lost your ability to feel certain things in your body. You need to reacquire that ability to feel those specific things, because if you don't, any other kind of treatment or intervention that you're going to go after is only going to be putting a band-aid on it. So it's not going to address the root issue. What am I talking about? So you could learn to strengthen whatever muscle you want, but odds are the person that's giving you an exercise is not looking at it from an integrated fashion. They are not going to look at you getting your obliques to move your rib cage. They're going to get you to feel your obliques by tightening and creating a stiff core. They are not going to be focused so much on serratus. They may be focused on external rotators of the shoulder. They may work on lats. They may look on depressors of the shoulder blade. Ow. But none of those things are really addressing what you need. The brain needs specific things. It needs to feel the obliques doing their job, hamstrings doing their job, adductors doing their job. It needs to feel increased pressure on the heel. It needs to feel the clavicle moving away from the rib cage. So it's this separation happening. It needs to feel all of these things, and it needs to feel them on one side first, the right. Why? So let's say you want to move around and use your arm without getting a pissed off elbow. Moving around without that annoyance is going to be using or painting with the color purple. But how do you get the color purple? It's not a prime color, right? You need blue and, what is it, blue and red? You need blue and red in order to make the color purple. But if you don't have a blue crayon or a blue bucket of paint or whatever, if you don't have the access to the color blue, you cannot make purple. The color blue is essential to you creating the color purple. So the color blue is your obliques, your heels, your hamstrings, your adductors, your serratus. These muscles appropriately moving a pair of bones is going to be akin to you possessing the color blue so that you can then use the color purple. All right? It's not simply about strengthening these other things because then like, oh, well, we'll give you more red or we'll give you some yellow or we'll give you all this other stuff. Yeah, you're giving me colors that have nothing to do with my desired outcome. You're giving me things that are trying to hide and mask the fact that I can no longer create the color purple by giving me other compensations that are not the actual thing that I want. Okay? So when we are plagued by this inconvenience of an elbow issue, more often than not, it's that no one has taught you how to exhale fully and appropriately fill up your lungs. They've taught you to belly breathe maybe, or to draw your belly in, or to do any number of other things like stiffen your core, but they haven't actually taught you breathing. They haven't taught you respiration. That's a big issue, because if you can't manipulate your rib cage, like if your ribs are poking out at the bottom of your rib cage, then yeah, you've never exhaled fully in your life. You've never inhaled fully in your life. It's no wonder that your shoulder is not really the most stable of structures, and therefore neither is your elbow. And you've been using it to manipulate objects all of your life. So for a lot of people, this is what it's really going to come down to. It's learning how to exhale, learning how to inhale as a result of a good exhale. And then it's, can you organize your bones in a certain way so that you can feel and acquire this specific feedback, namely adductors, hamstrings, obliques. Like I'm a broken record at this point. For people that don't know how to begin, I can recommend playing around with this video, which is the all fours belly lift. If that's too difficult, you can try that video, which is your back supported on a wall and you reaching. Both of those drills can give you a sense of how to start playing and interacting between your shoulder blade and your humerus, which is then right next to your elbow, and your rib cage. So you need to be able to marry these two movements or marry these two concepts together well, so that you can finally be free of elbow issues. Because the elbows are trying to behave like a shoulder, and then the shoulder is not behaving like a shoulder because the ribs aren't doing their job, and probably the pelvis isn't. Like, you can see how this all just keeps cascading down and up the chain. Right? Like, oh, I have a wrist issue. Oh, I have an elbow issue. Yeah. But how is your breathing? How's your rib cage position? How's your pelvis position? Can you shift your bones? Can you adduct? Meaning, can you close down your hip? I'll never ask you if you can open your hip. I don't care if you can open your hips. Odds are you can open your hips just fine. You have an issue closing the hips. I talked about that in, was it last week's video? Yeah, why opening your hips is not a good idea, right? So it has to come down to, can you manage yourself well against gravity? I am not talking about simply strengthening muscles. I don't care about that. It's next to meaningless to me, and should be next to meaningless to you if you're talking about being able to move freely and move in a pain-free fashion. You need specific things. If you've never learned how to acquire these specific things, then you need to learn how to acquire these specific things. There is no substitute for this stuff. So that's it for this week. But hold on. If you want to pick the topic for next week's video or a future video, feel free to hit me up either via DM on Instagram or message me on LinkedIn, or you can drop a comment down below. If I feel that I can make a decent video with some good content out of it, maybe come up with a drill or two for you guys, I will absolutely do that. So until next Tuesday.